The conflict in the Congo can be seen as a result of Congolese independence and previous colonial rule. The movement towards independence began when Belgium decided that they did not want to fight against rising Congolese nationalist groups, so they withdrew quickly on June 30, 1960. The Belgian Congo then became known as the Democratic Republic of the Congo. However, the Congo was not ready for independence. They had no trained doctors, lawyers, or military officers. This became problematic as violence erupted within the country. Previously, during colonial rule, the police were used to stop disturbances and put down protests, so this practice continued as different politicians, political parties, and tribes conflicted with each other over differences after their independence. The escalating violence quickly led to impending crisis.
In 1959, the Belgian government in charge of the Congo gave way to independence, as was the goal of the Congolese people. Belgium left, hoping to retain a substantial role in its former colony. Rival Congolese political parties had formed underneath the Belgian government, but once an election was to be had, the results were inconclusive and no leader was elected. Instead, a coalition government had to be quickly put together for when the country became the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The president was the conservative-inclined Joseph Kasavubu. The prime minister was the left-wing nationalist Patrice Lumumba. Only 2 weeks after independence, the Congo government was in trouble. The national army had mutinied, and there were disturbances around the country in which Belgians were attacked.
Violence and chaos in the Congo. Barely 11 days after official independence from Belgium, Congolese troops mutinied and began a wave of attacks and looting throughout the far-flung sectors of the former colony. Meanwhile, in Belgium and in African countries bordering on the Congo, refugees are pouring in with harrowing tales of violence and of hasty flight. At least 10 Europeans were reported killed in a weekend of violence, with armed clashes in the key cities of Elizabethville, Stanleyville, and Louisbourg, which was to be the new nation's capital. At the request of Congolese officials, Belgian paratroops were recalled to quell the native army's mutiny and reign of terror, a harsh awakening to reality from golden dreams of independence.
As soon as the fighting broke out, Belgian troops were sent in. The Congolese were reluctant to allow this, but eventually did for the added help, though they soon realized that the Belgians didn't want to leave until some stability was found. Lumumba and Kasavubu became concerned that Belgium was trying to reoccupy the country and called for the immediate withdrawal of Belgian troops. Also at this time, a local leader, Moise Tshombe, of the southern province of Katanga, declared his territory independent. The Lumumba government believed that Tshombe did this under the influence of the British and the French, who wanted control of this minerally rich region. Tshombe also had evident Belgian backing, and Kasavubu and Lumumba now appealed to the United Nations to restore order and unity, as well as trying to get the Belgian troops out of the Congo. The UN did end up sending troops to help, as well as trying to come to peace talks with Belgium about leaving the Congo. Lumumba also tried to enlist the aid of the United States and other Western powers, but with no success. Lumumba was not as satisfied as Kasavubu was with the UN's response to the crisis, and then asked the Soviet Union for assistance. The Soviet Union saw this as a possibility of gaining a foothold in Central Africa and responded more positively. This was too much for Kasavubu, who dismissed Lumumba as prime minister. Lumumba retaliated by proclaiming that he had overthrown Kasavubu. The idea of Soviet soldiers in the Congo horrified the United States President Eisenhower. The Cuban Revolution had shown him that Third World communist revolutions were possible, and he wanted to keep that from happening again. The first contingent of the United Nations police force was airlifted in, and this symbolized the United Nations' first actual police action in Africa. Fighting occurred over the next 5 years between Kasavubu and his supporters, Tshombe and the Katangan side, Lumumba's supporters until he was killed, and the Army Chief of Staff Mobutu's soldiers. It ended in 1965 when Colonel Joseph Mobutu announces that the army was taking over temporarily to restore order. He established a dictatorship and renamed the country Zaire in 1971. During the 5 years of fighting and turmoil, Patrice Lumumba was killed when he was seized and handed over to the Katangans in January 1961. The circumstances of his murder have never been fully established, giving rise to numerous conspiracy theories. One that was proven was that Dwight D. Eisenhower in 1960 approved a CIA plan for assassination of Lumumba. But Lumumba was killed by other enemies in Katanga before the American agents could reach him. This was done by the United States to help stop the flow of communism.
The end of the crisis said more about the United Nations than it did about Congo itself. The crisis proved that UN involvement could worsen a situation and draw on the superpowers. By sending in troops to help with the crisis, the UN angered Lumumba, who accused the UN of being pro-Western and tool of imperialists. This was a sentiment that many other countries agreed with. The Soviet Union thought they could take advantage of the situation with the United Nations, since more and more countries were turning against the UN. This drew the Soviet Union into the crisis. Despite the fact that the Soviet Union was increasingly interested in the crisis, the situation in the Congo can be seen as more of a civil war than a proxy war. It started as a result of increased tension within the country due to conflicting political parties, tribes, and territories. The Soviet Union only got involved after the UN started helping, and they did not play a large direct role in the nature of the conflict. This Congo crisis, though important to the Cold War, was the result of internal conflict and can therefore be considered a civil war.